Hey, this is Mike from the Run Testers, and in this video we're going to be talking about the brand new Garmin Fenix 8 Pro. Now, the Pro model of the Fenix typically is kind of filling that void between Garmin that has some really big features to roll through on the Fenix line. Now, that's definitely not the case here with this Pro. There are some pretty big firsts for Garmin here. We'll take you through what exactly those are, how they work. Then myself, Nick and Kieran will take you through some early testing time and let you know the Garmin Fenix 8 Pro is a Pro Fenix to get excited about, whether it's one you need to spend some pretty big money on. Okay, so let's run you through those key Fenix 8 Pro details. Let's talk models, and there's no solar Fenix 8 Pro, with the AMOLED Pro coming in just the 47mm and 51mm sizes. The new MicroLED model is only available in the largest 51mm case size. The new MicroLED model is only available in the largest 51mm case size. The biggest benefits offered with that micro-LED display is the promise of an overall brighter display, better viewing angles in brighter outdoor conditions, and is a technology that in the long term should lead to better battery performance and less of the screen degradation associated with AMOLED screen technology. Along with everything you get on the Fenix 8, the big new features are mainly built around the added LTE and satellite connectivity, allowing you to make calls, send voice messages, text, view weather, and send SOS messages. These features do, however, require an added subscription to unlock them. There are some differences in battery life compared to the non-Pro Fenix 8, with some promised improvements when using it with the always-on display mode, though there is a drop when using it with the best GPS accuracy. Then there's price, and there's a jump across the board with the micro-LED model coming in the most expensive.
So in the very brief time I've had the Garmin Fenix 8 Pro 51 AMOLED, I have managed to do 3 runs. I've done a bunch of bike rides. I've tested the battery life, the heart rate up against the Garmin HRM 600 chest strap, and I've had it up against the Garmin Fenix 8 51mm AMOLED here to compare all of those things. Now, before we get into that though, let's talk about the phone-free messaging and voice calls. I've tested text and voice over LTE and satellite. First thing to say is the setup is a bit of a faff with multiple apps and various hoops to jump through. Ideally, that would be a little more simple, but you only have to wrestle with it once. There is a lot to digest as well in terms of the packages and pricing of the inReach features, but I like that there's a free trial, and once you're up and running with all of that, using the messenger and voice calls is actually pretty easy on the watch. It's fairly easy to navigate to what you've got to do, whether you're mid-workout or not. For texting, there is a bunch of canned messages in there that you can send easily and quickly with a couple taps. You can create your own stock messages as well to bulk those out. Sending a voice message to someone who isn't on Garmin Messenger delivers them a link for them to download the app to be able to hear it. Likewise, you can only make calls to those who have the Messenger app installed. So I would say at the moment, all of this wraps up into something that is more a safety tool for check-ins and kind of those I'm still alive updates, rather than a regular kind of daily comms tool where you're going to be making phone calls via the watch. And that kind of needing to do some of the comms over Messenger will be a bit of a barrier, but I don't think it's unthinkable that a handful of your family or crew would load up Messenger if you're embarking on something that requires that kind of backup or those kind of regular contacts. Back in 2022, I ran the Danube River about 1,600 miles across Europe, largely solo, and I actually took an inReach Mini with me to do the live tracking, to send a message each morning that I'd started and a message each day when I'd finished, along with the live tracking, and had that backup kind of SOS features. I like the fact that I could now do all of that on my watch or on one watch rather than carry the extra kit. And the fact it will cross borders as well, I think, is also a big tick for these tools. So I think if you're going into it in that mind, am I going to use this kind of as a safety device, or that's where I think this stuff really works. It's not perfectly implemented, but it will do a good job. Then on to design. The screen is noticeably brighter than the Fenix 8. It's brilliantly vibrant, it's sharp, it's colourful. You've got ample room for all of your stats, kind of in classic Fenix style. The watch is thicker to encase all of that tech. It does feel a bit bulkier on the wrist. Now, the Fenix 8 was already a beast, and this is even more so, even though on paper the Fenix 8 Pro is actually slightly lighter. It's a couple of grams lighter than the Fenix 8 51 AMOLED in those sizes. Now, I've been wearing the Fenix 8 for months now, on and off, whilst testing. I've noticed that the buttons have gotten a bit stiff in some cases. They're not quite as responsive. I think the buttons on the Fenix 8 Pro, they just feel quicker and better. They respond faster with a little less effort. I also think the Fenix 8 Pro moves between screens faster. When it comes to battery life, here's the findings from some of my early tests. I took the Fenix 8 Pro and the Fenix 8 off charge at the same time, put them in the same settings, that's full screen brightness, always on, switched on. And 19 hours later, the Fenix 8 Pro was at 87%, the Fenix 8 was at 90%. That's with roughly 3.5 hours GPS tracking. For a 1 hour run in max accuracy mode, the Fenix 8 Pro burned 2%, the Fenix 8 in the same settings burned 1%. Dropping the Fenix 8 Pro into GPS only for an hour run burned just over 1%. The overnight burn for the Fenix 8 Pro was the same as the Fenix 8. Both came in around 2%, and that is about as good as it gets when it comes to GPS watches. Then on to the accuracy, starting with the optical heart rate. Both the 5 odd mile runs I did were at an easy pace, but these were city runs, so there was a bit of stop-start traffic lights. Here's one where you can see both the Fenix 8 Pro and the Fenix 8 had some wobbles against the chest strap. I put up against the HRM 600, but hit the averages pretty closely. Then on to my second easy 5 miler, and it's a similar story. The HR averages match the chest strap pretty close, but both the Fenix 8 and the 8 Pro have wobbles, although the Fenix Pro has fewer of them. But overall, I'd say this is pretty standard optical heart rate performance. Onto GPS, and the Garmin Fenix 8 Pro and Fenix 8 were almost identical on distances in max accuracy mode, as was the 409/70. Then when I switched to GPS only on the Fenix 8 Pro, it still came within an acceptable margin for error versus the Fenix 8 and the 409/70, both in max accuracy modes. The tracks look pretty good too, though as you'd expect, there are a few meanders from the Fenix 8 Pro when you drop down to that GPS only mode versus the dual band, multi-band, whatever, the dual frequency max accuracy mode.
So I've just had the Fenix 8 Pro in for a couple of days. I've used it throughout that time for a couple of runs. So it's going to be a very early first impressions of the watch and how it feels compared to the Fenix 8, which I also wore for one of those runs. This is the AMOLED version of the Fenix 8 Pro, not able to test the MicroLED one yet, and it's the 47mm watch. So when it comes to the design of the watch, it is noticeably thicker than the standard Fenix 8 on the wrist, and if you're looking at it, it does stick out a fair bit further. It feels quite a bulky watch. I mean, the Fenix 8 is a pretty bulky watch itself, but I think especially if you're looking at the larger sizes of the Fenix 8 Pro, that extra thickness is really going to be quite noticeable on the wrist. But also noticeable is the brighter screen. It's very much in line with what we've seen with things like the Venue X1 and the 409/70. You are getting a clearer screen a little bit than on the Fenix 8, and at angles on the run, that kind of thing. I noticed it at the track today when I was just glancing down to see if my rep was on pace. Just seeing the watch at an angle is a bit easier with this slightly brighter screen. It's not a night and day difference. The Fenix 8 AMOLED display is already very good itself. Obviously, it's very interesting to see how the MicroLED display compares, but yeah, you have got that brighter display now to make sure that the Fenix is the flagship. Like, it was a bit odd, I suppose, that the 409/70 and the Venue X1 had brighter displays than the Fenix model. Then on the runs I've done so far, looking in terms of battery life, like so far the overall battery drain's been quite fast, but I've had a couple of software updates to do, and I've played around with the watch a lot, so we'll talk more about the actual watch battery life in the full review. But on the run in multi-band mode, I did a 1 hour run and it drained 5%, which would be 20 hours of battery life, which is about in line with Garmin's figures of 23 hours of auto select. So I forced it into multi-band mode, the most accurate and power intensive mode, so 20 hours is pretty good, and it drained about 4% per hour on the track earlier as well. And then in terms of GPS and heart rate accuracy, everything's been very good so far. The GPS track yesterday matched up very closely with that of the Fenix 8. The heart rate was bang in line with the chest strap this morning on the track when I was running 800 meter intervals with 200 meter float recoveries. I've got a very clear graph showing that the Fenix 8 was in line with the chest strap. So early days, but I expect very good GPS and heart rate accuracy from this watch, and that's what I've seen so far. Then the satellite technology, which I suppose is the most notable new feature on the Fenix 8 AMOLED here. I think it's a really good idea to have this on a watch, especially one like the Fenix that is designed for big adventures. I've not been on any big adventures in the past couple of days, but I have tried out forcing messages via satellite mode or LTE mode. It took me about a minute and a half to get the satellites to link to the watch, holding the watch at an angle to try and make sure it reads the satellite, and I'm in London, so obviously we'll try and do that in a more remote area at some point. But aside from a little bit of a faff setting up the subscription at the start and that kind of thing, which didn't take that long, it seems pretty easy to use. You do have to use Garmin Messenger to get the most out of a lot of the features, but it's not a great hardship. I think for the use case I really see this for, which is staying in touch with people if you don't want to carry your phone or just be in the wild in general. It's not like you're going to try and be in touch with those people constantly during that time, so having something on your wrist that can do these emergency notifications or even just general location updates is definitely a good idea. It's a bit of a shame that the emergency SOS messages are not free though, which they are on the Google Pixel Watch 4 and the new Apple Watch Ultra 3, you get them for free for 2 years. I think this is something that Garmin should look at doing, really. I feel like they could make that area of their satellite and LTE connectivity free and charge for things like regular messaging, location tracking, that kind of thing. But the emergency SOS messages, could be free like they are with the Apple and the Google system. But yeah, certainly a good addition to the watch, I think. And as someone who does carry their phone with them, even on runs, in very safe nearby environments, because I want to be easily reachable by my family in case anything goes wrong at home or if anything goes wrong with me, having that now available in a Garmin watch is useful. It was a feature that was more confined to smartwatches.
So into that run test now, I've done 3 runs with the Fenix 8 Pro, and I've got the 47mm AMOLED version. Now the first run I did was a kind of nippy 5k run. I had this on, and I also had the 51mm Fenix 8. To get a sense if there's any kind of key differences in terms of design, the feel of the watches, I would say there is. This watch, definitely the Fenix 8 Pro, does feel a little bit thicker in comparison. I think that's obviously to account for the fact that you've got that extra kind of connectivity technology on board here. The GPS performance looked fine. It's the same technology as the Fenix 8. Similarly with the heart rate sensor technology, I always have a little bit of an issue with these bigger Garmin watches in terms of getting good kind of performance and heart rate for those kind of higher intensity runs, and that's kind of what I expect to see throughout my testing here. Then I did a longer run, and that was kind of with the Sunto Race 2. So comparing it to another watch I know has good dual band GPS performance, and that's what I saw from the Fenix 8 Pro in that run as well. But also a better opportunity to get a better feel of those kind of LTE kind of connectivity features. Obviously, you've got that satellite one there. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on that. Find somewhere a little bit more remote to kind of really put that to good use for the full review. But right now, kind of focusing in this video on the kind of LTE kind of functionality here, which is something that I think a lot of Garmin users have been calling out for, particularly because you have it on the Apple Watch and other smartwatches as well. Now it's treated slightly differently here on the Garmin. This isn't a feature that's going to let you stream music. It's not going to give you access to the App Store, the Connect IQ App Store. It's really about communication. It's really about allowing you to kind of send messages, make calls, really enhance those safety features that Garmin offers. Now, in terms of setting things up, what's key to know here is that you are going to need an added subscription to enable those features. That's set up through the Garmin Connect companion app, and it will cost extra money to do that. So there's a slight bit of faff kind of setting things up initially. You also need to have the Garmin Messenger app on your phone, which will sync that to your watch as well. Now, what's key to know here is that when you're using those features and you've got the LTE kind of support set up, is that when you want to communicate with people, it's mainly done through that Messenger app. So what it really requires is for those other people to have that Garmin Messenger app, whether it's people that have Garmin watches, whether it's someone that just, that has got it on their phone as an app to be able to communicate with you. That's a really key thing to kind of mention here. In terms of using the feature, now the way I did it is I kind of disconnected the watch from Bluetooth, so it's not really kind of communicating with the phone or trying to use the phone to communicate. And what that does is if someone tries to message you, someone tries to kind of call you, it will kind of look for that LTE connection. Generally doesn't take too long to do that. And then you're able to kind of see messages come through, communicate through kind of texting on screen. You can make calls as well. Now, the messaging, I would say it's a little slow going in terms of kind of displaying those messages from people based on kind of speaking to people who are sending me through the messages. In terms of the call quality, I would say it's very loud in terms of using the LTE functionality and using it for calls. It's not super clear. I think when I compare it to other smartwatches that offer this feature, I think clarity may be something I'll be interested to see how that works. But in terms of volume and giving you that kind of level of, particularly if you're in busy environments and trying to kind of make a call and handle a call, I think absolutely you're getting plenty on that front. And yeah, the feature has worked generally fine. It's just keeping it in mind of how you're going to be able to use this feature, what you're not going to be able to do with it overall. Now, the other thing to mention here is battery life. Now, we've seen Garmin introduce AMOLED displays, which does drain the battery life quicker. And now you've got kind of LTE in the mix as well. Now, I've only used it kind of fleetingly during my runs, not throughout. And I think if you look at the numbers in general, there is a bit of a battery drop from the Fenix 8 given those added features. So that is definitely something to keep in mind here. I am seeing a kind of a bit more of a noticeable drain daily, so you know, it does feel like you are kind of sacrificing a little bit of battery life. It's still going to be good, but it's probably not going to be the best on a Fenix watch or one of those kind of endurance Garmin watches that are available. So yeah, I mean, the LTE features, once I got them set up, which is a little bit of a faff, have worked absolutely kind of fine and give you the kind of functionality that you expect to see. In terms of those satellite kind of communication elements, that's something I'm going to reserve for the full review. But right now, feels like a Fenix, runs like a Fenix, and those added features do seem to work perfectly fine.
So it's very early days. I've only had the watch for a couple of days, but first impressions from those early tests, and I think this is all good, solid Fenix stuff. It's well built, rugged, long battery life, even though it's dropped a bit to accommodate that brighter screen and some of the other tech. It's fully featured across all the training, racing, recovery, daily health insights, navigation, as well as the full gamut of smartwatch smarts. The brighter screen is an improvement in terms of vibrancy. It's rather lovely, but you're trading battery life for it, around 15% in max accuracy GPS mode. I think you have to ask yourself if that's a good trade. Then there's the thickness. That does make an already quite bulky watch a bit less wrist friendly, and there's no smaller 43mm option. The LTE satellite messenger tools, tracking and safety extras are exciting, but I'd say more so for people who might already sort of reach for an inReach, or those who regularly go off grid or run without a phone and want safety backup. If I'd had this watch before my Danube run, I'd have been dead happy with it. It would have been perfect for that situation. There are situations in the UK where I think that communications backup could also be great to have for safety, but we're talking like heading into the mountains or looking into kind of phone coverage, black spots, those kind of things. Then you get to the price and whether all that stacks up to £200 of extra firepower over the Fenix 8, plus what you might pay to unlock the inReach tools on top of that. I think you'd have to really be venturing into situations where that backup is a must-have safety net quite often, or really have a strong preference to never run with your phone and the need to text or call during that run or either side of it. And for those you might want to call, to also be happy to be on Garmin Messenger. That's quite a lot. Or you'd really have to want that brighter screen to be willing to pay a bit more for it. From what I've seen so far, I think the Fenix 8 would still be my recommendation for most runners looking for Garmin's, sort of out of Garmin's top tier watches in the Fenix lineup. I also think in a lot of cases, if you're going to step down or you want something lighter and easier, more wearable, the 40970 has a lot of the firepower most runners need to compete with the Fenix, but in a cheaper, more wearable package.
So very, very early verdict here on the Fenix 8 Pro, but I do think this is a launch that makes sense, and it's priced, in line with the Fenix 8 series, as opposed to the MicroLED launch, which is a very wild launch with really new tech, and I guess Garmin is a little bit feeling out what they can do with it. It's got a really high price tag. The Fenix 8 Pro AMOLED, it feels like just a natural step up on the Fenix 8 for a little bit more money on what is already an expensive watch, but you are getting features that are worth that increase in the cost, I would say, in terms of the brighter display and that satellite connectivity. Like, if you don't need those or aren't too worried about those, it could be a good time to start looking around for deals on the Fenix 8, which is not only going to be cheaper and maybe popping up in sales, but also a little bit thinner and lighter on the wrist, which is always nice of watches of this size, I find. But yeah, early days. I think the sports performance is going to be there. You're now getting a couple of new features on top, and you're going to have to pay a lot for that, but that's kind of what you expect with the Fenix these days. It's an expensive watch, but it has all the features that you're going to get from a Garmin watch, and no one else is really competing with it on features yet. So you can get obviously the satellite tech on stuff like the Apple Watch Ultra 3, but you're not going to get the same level of sports and navigation, features that you get on the Garmin, or the battery life. And then the other big sports watch providers haven't really moved into this area so much and aren't covering off the same amount of features again that you are getting on the Fenix 8. So it's a bit of a standout product on that. Price is obviously very high, but it does make sense, as an upgrade on the Fenix 8.
So as many thoughts on the Garmin Fenix 8 Pro, and as a reminder, I've got the 47mm AMOLED version. Now, it looks like a Fenix 8, it tracks runs, as far as I can see, like the Fenix 8 as well. So what are you getting here? Mainly those added connectivity features, and the watch itself is more expensive than the Fenix 8, and you do also have to account for the added subscription that you need to use those LTE and satellite features. I think absolutely it's great that Garmin is introducing these features, and hopefully these will be features that will be offered throughout its line. It's come at the expense of an added cost. I think also a kind of bigger, kind of thicker design as well, which hopefully over time will get slimmer. But if you do like the idea of those features, you've been hankering for those features on a Fenix, they do at the moment seem to work okay. I haven't spent, huge amounts of time with this kind of satellite side of things, but these features here that we are, people have been asking for on a Garmin are now here and are realised in one of its biggest kind of, best loved watches. Do I feel like from a run tracking experience, it is better so far than the Fenix 8? I don't, but obviously, as I said, you are not going to get those kind of added connectivity features on the Fenix 8. So if that's something that you like the idea of, then potentially this is a watch that might be for you. But, you do really have to factor in that added cost, which does make it a very expensive proposition. But so far, in terms of run tracking experience, it's been solid overall, just not that massively different, but definitely I can notice there is a little bit more of a drop in battery life in general compared to the Fenix 8. So yeah, I've had a good experience so far tracking my runs and kind of tapping into some of those connectivity or added connectivity features that you get here. You just have, or for me, it's like having that in the back of your head that you are going to have to spend a lot more money to get that from the Fenix 8 Pro, and I'm kind of feeling like hopefully maybe these will be features that will be made more affordable in other Garmin watches, maybe in the not too distant future. Okay, so they have some early multi-tester thoughts on the Garmin Fenix 8 Pro AMOLED version. We should hopefully be getting the micro LED version to have a look at as well too. So we will be able to share some thoughts hopefully on that version of the 8 Pro in the near future. In the meantime, if you've got any questions about the Fenix 8 Pro that we haven't covered in this video that you're desperate to know about before thinking about buying this watch, do let us know in the comments. As always, like and subscribe, hit that little bell to find out about our latest videos, and yeah, we'll see you for the next run testers video.